This girl approached a millionaire and said, "Sir, my stepfather leaves me with no food every day." Before the millionaire could say anything, he sees the girl pointing at a violent man who arrives and does something terrible. Comment on what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The rain fell hard that afternoon in Harmony Creek, West Virginia, when Ethan Davies, 42, parked his imported car in front of Joe's General Store. As he watched the drops run down the windshield, his thoughts wandered to the decision he had made to return to his hometown after 20 years living in New York City. His success as an entrepreneur in the natural cosmetics sector didn't fill the void he carried, and his grandmother's recent passing brought him back to care for the house where he grew up. Distracted by his memories, he barely noticed when a small figure approached his car. It was a girl of approximately 6 years old, soaked by the rain, with worn clothes and a look that carried a sadness incompatible with her age. Her dark hair, wet and disheveled, framed a delicate face that showed clear signs of malnutrition. "Mister, can you help me? My stepfather doesn't give me any food," she said in a low voice, holding a soggy cardboard box that was falling apart in her small hands. Ethan felt his heart clench. Something in that child's eyes touched him deeply. Discreetly, she pointed to a man who watched the scene from afar, leaning against a lamppost. Even from a distance, his intimidating posture was evident. "What's your name, sweetie?" Ethan asked, turning off the car and grabbing his umbrella. "Lily," she replied, taking a step back, startled by the sudden movement. "No need to be scared, Lily. How about we go into that diner over there and you can get something to eat?" he offered, pointing to the establishment across the street. The girl hesitated, looking nervously at the man by the lamppost. Ethan followed her gaze and noticed that the man had moved, beginning to walk slowly towards them. "Is that your stepfather?" he asked, already guessing the answer. Lily just nodded, clutching the wet box to her chest. That's when something fell from it, a folded piece of paper that the wind began to carry. The girl tried to pick it up, but Ethan was faster. It was a pencil drawing already stained by the rain. It showed a house with several children drawn, simply like any child's drawing. But what caught his attention was a disturbing detail. There was a female figure marked with a red X. "Come on, let's go inside before you get sick from this rain," he said, guiding her towards the diner, but without taking his eyes off the man who was now following them openly. Inside the establishment, little Lily sat down at one of the tables, her feet swinging without reaching the floor. Her eyes anxiously scanned the display cases filled with pastries and treats, but she kept her hands firmly crossed on her lap, as if she were afraid to touch anything. Ethan ordered a hot chocolate and some toast for her. As he watched the girl eat, first hesitant, then with a barely disguised hunger, he noticed that the man who had been following them had entered the diner and sat down at a table near the door. "Lily, where's your mum?" he asked softly, trying not to scare her. The girl stopped eating for a moment, her eyes filling with tears. "Mummy's sick. She sews, but now she can't work anymore because she can't stop coughing." At that moment, the man from the lamppost got up and approached their table. Up close, his appearance was even more intimidating. He appeared to be about 38 years old, with a lined face and cold eyes that scanned Ethan with a barely contained hostility. "Got a problem with my stepdaughter?" he asked, his gravelly voice carrying a veiled threat. "Rick," Lily whispered, shrinking visibly in the chair. "Didn't know she had a stepfather," Ethan replied, keeping his voice calm as he studied the man. "Just offering her something to eat." "Very generous of you," Rick said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But Lily needs to go home now. Her mother is waiting." The girl got up quickly, leaving half a toast on her plate. Ethan noticed that her hands were trembling slightly. "Thank the man, Lily," ordered Rick, placing a heavy hand on her shoulder. "Thank you, mister," she murmured, barely managing to look at Ethan. As they left the diner, Ethan remained seated, watching through the window as Rick practically dragged Lily down the street, the rain returning to soak them. The scene made his stomach churn. "You shouldn't have given her food," said a voice behind him. It was Donna Marlene, the owner of the diner, a lady of about 60 years who he knew since childhood. "Why not?" he asked, turning to face her. "Because now he's going to hit her." "For accepting help from strangers," the lady replied, her wrinkled face marked with concern. "It's not the first time I've seen this scene. That man, there's something wrong with him, very wrong." Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. The drawing he had kept in his pocket seemed to weigh a ton. "Donna Marlene, what else do you know about this girl?" The lady looked around, as if checking if there was anyone else nearby, and sat down in the chair that Lily had occupied. "Her mother, Cindy, was one of the best seamstresses in the region, made wedding dresses that were true works of art. But a few months ago, she started having health problems, a cough that won't go away. That's when this Rick appeared, saying he was going to help. In less than a month, he was already living with them." Ethan absorbed the information, his brow furrowed in concern. "And Lily's father, nobody knows for sure. Disappeared before she was born. Cindy never talked much about it." A loud thunder shook the diner's windows, making the few customers present jump. But it wasn't the noise that made Ethan feel a chill. It was the sight of an elderly lady standing across the street, staring at him through the rain. "Who is that lady?" he asked Donna Marlene. The diner owner followed his gaze and her face paled slightly. "That's Donna Isabel. She lost her grandson a few weeks ago. The boy simply disappeared. And you know what's even stranger? He used to hang out with Lily, begging for money on the streets." Donna Marlene's revelation about the disappearance of Isabel's grandson left Ethan uneasy. Even after the rain subsided and the elderly lady crossed the street towards the diner, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something very wrong happening in that town. Donna Isabel entered the establishment, her clothes slightly damp, and a black shawl covering her grey hair. Her eyes, although tired, maintained a liveliness that contrasted with her fragile appearance. Without ceremony, she sat down at the table where Ethan was still sitting. "You're Donna Celeste's grandson, aren't you? That big house on Maple Street," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Ethan nodded, surprised. "You knew my grandmother." Everyone knew Donna Celeste, a fair woman who helped many people around here. "Her passing was a great loss to our community," Isabel replied, lowering her voice. "But it's not about your grandmother that we need to talk about. It's about Lily and the other children." The businessman leaned forward, interested. Donna Marlene quickly brought Isabel a coffee and moved away, giving them privacy. "My grandson Benny was only 7 years old," Isabel began, her wrinkled hands clutching the coffee cup. "He and Lily used to play together in the empty lot near my house. They were inseparable until Rick started showing up there." "Are you saying that Rick has something to do with your grandson's disappearance?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice low. "I can't prove anything," she replied, looking nervously at the door. "But I know that Rick forces several children in the neighborhood to beg for money on the streets. Benny was one of them. The day he disappeared, he had refused to hand over all the money he had made." Ethan felt his stomach churn. Lily's drawing was still in his pocket, and now it was starting to make more sense. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're different. I saw how you looked at Lily with genuine concern. And also because your grandmother always said that you had a good heart, even after you left for New York." Isabel paused, taking a sip of coffee. "Besides, you have resources, contacts. You can do something that we, poor residents of the neighborhood, can't." Have you tried reporting it?" Ethan asked cautiously. "Nobody does anything," Isabel replied, with bitterness in her voice. "Rick has protection from big shots. Tony Alvarez himself is behind him." The name made Ethan straighten up in the chair. Tony Alvarez was one of the most influential businessmen in Harmony Creek, owner of several properties and known for his political aspirations. "How does Tony protect him?" he questioned. "Rick is running for city council in the next election, with Tony's support, and they say that part of the money that the children collect goes directly into the campaign coffers." The conversation was interrupted by a noisy group that entered the diner. Isabel immediately became tense. "I need to go," she said hastily. "But if you really want to help, find out more about Lily's mother. Cindy wasn't always like this, submissive to Rick. She was different before she got sick." Before Ethan could ask more questions, the lady had already left through the back door. Determined to investigate further, he paid the bill and went out. To the street, still damp from the rain. His car was parked a few feet away, but something made him hesitate before getting in. Across the street, a woman watched the diner with interest. She appeared to be about 65 years old, and there was something familiar about her face. When their eyes met, she made a discreet gesture for him to follow her and began to walk towards an old house with blue windows. Intrigued, Ethan crossed the street. The woman was waiting for him in the small front garden of the house, among well-kept rose bushes. "My name is Dorothy," she said as soon as he approached. "I was your grandmother's housekeeper for more than 30 years. Recognition hit Ethan like a wave. Of course, Dorothy. How many times had she made cookies for him when he was a kid? "Dorothy, do you still live here?" "Yes, your grandmother left me this house before passing," she replied with a sad smile. "But it's not about the past that we need to talk about. It's about Cindy." The name of Lily's mother made Ethan pay even more attention. "Come in," Dorothy invited. "Some conversations shouldn't happen on the street." The house inside was simple but cozy, with antique furniture and a comforting smell of freshly brewed coffee. Dorothy led him to a small living room where old photos decorated the walls. "Do you know this girl?" she asked, pointing to a yellowish photograph. Ethan approached to see better. It was a class photo, probably from the local school. Among the smiling children, he recognized himself at about 12 years old, and next to him, "That's Cindy?" he asked, incredulously. "Yes," confirmed Dorothy. "You studied together for years before you moved to New York. She was one of the best students in the class." The revelation took him by surprise. How hadn't he recognized the name? But of course it had been so long. "What happened to her?" he asked, still absorbing the information. "Life happened," Dorothy replied with a sigh. "She got pregnant very young. The child's father disappeared and she had to drop out of school. But Cindy was strong, determined. She learned to sew from her mother and soon became the best seamstress in the region, made wedding dresses that looked like works of art. And now she's sick," Ethan completed. "Yes, a mysterious respiratory illness. It started shortly after she took on a big job for the Alvarez family. It was supposed to be the wedding dress for Tony's daughter." Ethan frowned. "The same Tony Alvarez who supports Rick?" Dorothy nodded, her face taking on a serious expression. "Cindy discovered something she shouldn't have while working at the Alvarez mansion, something related to old documents. Soon after, she started coughing non-stop. That's when Rick appeared, offering to help. At that moment, a noise on the street caught their attention. Through the window, they saw Rick passing by in his car, driving slowly, as if looking for something or someone. "He's checking who Lily went to today," Dorothy said, quickly closing the curtain. "You need to be careful, Ethan. This story is more complicated than it seems." "What exactly did Cindy discover?" he asked. "I don't know for sure, but it has to do with the land near the river, land that once belonged to your family." The mention of the land made Ethan remember something. Among the documents he found in his grandmother's house, there were old deeds that he needed to review. "Dorothy, I need to go, but before, tell me, Where can I find Cindy?" The lady hesitated for a moment. "She lives at the end of Willow Creek. Drive, last house on the right, but be careful, Rick rarely leaves her alone, and when he does..." A sharp scream cut through the air, coming from the street. Ethan ran to the window in time to see Lily being dragged by Rick into the car, while the girl struggled and cried. "My mom! He's going to hurt my mom!" she screamed desperately. Without thinking twice, Ethan ran out of the house. But when he reached the street, Rick's car had already disappeared around the corner, leaving only the echo of Lily's cries and a crumpled piece of paper on the sidewalk. Another drawing, this time showing a woman lying on a bed, with red stains that looked frighteningly like blood. Ethan wasted no time. He ran to his car while Dorothy shouted from the door, "Willow Creek Drive, last house on the right." His heart beat fast in his chest as he drove through the narrow streets of Harmony Creek, trying to remember the fastest way to get to Cindy's address. Willow Creek Drive was located in one of the poorest areas of the town, where the asphalt gave way to dirt roads, and the houses were crammed against each other in small and irregular lots. When he finally found the address, his stomach dropped. The front door was wide open, banging lightly in the wind. Cautiously, he approached the entrance. The interior of the house was dark, but he could hear muffled sounds coming from the back. Following the noise, he passed through a small room with simple and worn furniture, where scraps of fabric and an old sewing machine indicated Cindy's work. That's when he heard Rick's voice coming from one of the bedrooms. "Where did you hide those papers? Tell me now, or Lily will pay the price. Please don't hurt her," a woman's weak voice pleaded, interrupted by a violent cough. "I swear I don't know anything." Ethan quietly approached the half-open door. Inside the dimly lit room, he saw Cindy lying on a simple bed, her face pale and weakened by months of illness. Lily was huddled in a corner, crying softly, while Rick ransacked drawers and closets frantically. "Liar!" Rick shouted, knocking a pile of clothes to the floor. "You took documents from the Alvarez mansion. Tony himself told me he saw you photocopying papers in his office." At that moment, Lily noticed Ethan's presence in the doorway, and her eyes widened. Before she could make any sound, he put his finger to his lips, asking for silence. The girl understood and looked away, so as not to attract Rick's attention. I was just curious about the history of the property," Cindy said between fits of coughing. "To make the embroidery for the wedding dress, I wanted to use elements of the family." "Lies!" Rick turned to face her abruptly. "You found something about the land deeds, didn't you? Something that could harm Tony." Ethan realized he needed to act. Silently, he took his cell phone out of his pocket and started recording the scene. Every word of Rick's was a confession of the scheme they suspected existed. "So what if I did find something?" Cindy's voice gained a tone of defiance, even weak. "That land was stolen. I saw the original documents. It belongs to the Davies family." The name made Ethan hold his breath. So that was it. Cindy had discovered the truth about how Tony Alvarez appropriated his family's land. "You idiot!" Rick advanced menacingly towards the bed. "Do you know what happens to those who threaten Tony? Want to end up like your daughter's father?" The mention of Lily's father made Cindy pale even more. You know what happened to him?" A cruel smile formed on Rick's face. "Let's just say he was also very curious about Tony's business. And curiosity can be very dangerous in this town." It was at that moment that Lily, in a courageous impulse, ran to protect her mother, placing herself between her and Rick. "Don't hurt my mom!" Rick raised his hand to hit the girl, but Ethan was faster. In 2 steps, he was inside the room, grabbing the aggressor's arm. "Touch her and you'll regret it," he said with a calmness he didn't feel. "You!" Rick broke free, surprised and furious. "What are you doing here?" "Recording every word you say," Ethan replied, showing his cell phone. "Including your confession about what happened to Lily's father." Rick's face paled for a moment, but soon turned into a mask of fury. He advanced against Ethan, who managed to dodge, causing the aggressor to stumble and fall on the sewing machine. "Ethan?" Cindy's weak voice caught his attention. She was looking at him with a mixture of recognition and surprise. "Is that really you?" "Yes, Cindy, it's me. I'm back." Rick took advantage of this moment of distraction to get up and run out of the house. Ethan hesitated between chasing him and staying to protect Cindy and Lily. "Let him go," Cindy said between fits of coughing. "He'll go straight to Tony. You need to get out of here." "Not without you," Ethan replied, already helping her get out of bed. "Let's go to my house. It's the safest place right now." Lily quickly gathered some of her mother's belongings in a small bag, while Ethan helped Cindy walk to his car. The illness had left her very weak, and each step seemed to require immense effort. On the way to the house he had inherited from his grandmother, Ethan kept his eyes glued to the rearview mirror, making sure they weren't being followed. Lily was in the back seat, hugging her mother, who continued to have fits of coughing. "How did you find us?" Cindy asked when she managed to catch her breath. "Long story," he replied, turning onto a residential street. "But the most important thing now is to understand what you discovered in the Alvarez mansion. What documents is Rick looking for?" Cindy exchanged a meaningful look with her daughter before answering, "I discovered that Tony falsified deeds, not only of your family's land, but of several other properties. He took advantage of your grandmother's illness to forge documents, transferring everything to his name." "And where is this evidence now?" A new fit of coughing prevented Cindy from answering immediately. When she finally managed to speak, her voice was even weaker. "In the safest place I could think of, where no one would think to look." Before she could complete the sentence, a car suddenly emerged from a side street, almost hitting them. Ethan managed to swerve just in time, but recognized the driver. It was Tony Alvarez in person. "Hold on tight!" he shouted, accelerating the car. Through the mirrors, he could see Tony's vehicle chasing them, while another car, which he recognized as Rick's, joined the chase. "There!" Lily suddenly shouted, pointing to a narrow street. "There's a shortcut through Joe's alley." Ethan didn't question it. Following the girl's directions, he entered an alley so narrow that the mirrors almost scraped the walls. The larger cars of their pursuers wouldn't be able to pass through there. The alley led to a busy street near the central square. Ethan took advantage of the flow of people and cars to blend into the traffic, momentarily losing his pursuers. "How did you know that shortcut?" he asked Lily, still tense. "It's where I used to run when Rick wanted to hit me," she replied softly. "I know all the alleys in the city." Ethan's heart ached to hear that. How many other secrets and sufferings did that little girl keep? They finally arrived at his grandmother's house, an old but well-maintained building with a high wall and automatic gate. As soon as they entered and closed the gate, Cindy had another coughing fit, more violent than the previous ones. "Mom!" Lily cried, startled, seeing a trickle of blood run down the corner of Cindy's mouth. "We need to get her to a hospital," Ethan said, already preparing to leave again. "No!" Cindy grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "I can't go to the hospital. Tony has people there. That's how it started, after I started coughing blood." Her words were interrupted by another fit of coughing, and this time she fainted in Ethan's arms. "Mom!" Lily cried, clinging to her mother's dress. At that moment they heard loud knocks on the gate. Through the security camera, Ethan saw Tony Alvarez and Rick, accompanied by two men with intimidating appearances. "Open this gate, Davies!" Tony's voice sounded through the intercom. "You don't know what you're getting into!" Ethan looked at the unconscious Cindy, at the crying Lily, and at the men at the gate. He needed to make a quick decision. That's when he noticed something strange, a metallic glint coming from the lining of Cindy's dress. Carefully, he reached the spot and pulled out a small pen drive. "The documents," Lily murmured, recognizing the object. Mom kept everything in there. The knocks on the gate were getting louder. Ethan knew he wouldn't last much longer. That's when his cell phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. "This is Dorothy. There's a secret passage in your grandmother's library, behind the right bookcase, where the romance novels were. It leads to Father Anthony's house. Go quickly." Ethan had no time to lose, with Cindy unconscious in his arms and Lily trembling. Beside him, he ran to the house's library. The room, which maintained the same smell of old books from his childhood, was exactly as his grandmother had left it. Solid wood bookcases from floor to ceiling, the worn leather armchair where she used to read, and the side table where there was always a half-empty cup of tea. "Lily, help me look for a lever or something similar on the right bookcase," he asked, laying Cindy carefully on the old sofa. The knocks on the gate were getting louder and louder, echoing through the empty house. The girl, demonstrating a maturity beyond her 6 years, began to meticulously examine the bookcase. Her little fingers ran through the carvings of the wood, while Ethan checked Cindy's condition. Her breathing was weak and irregular, and a thin layer of sweat covered her forehead. "Mister, I found something!" Lily exclaimed suddenly. In one of the lower corners of the bookcase, partially hidden by a pile of dusty books, there was a small brass knob. Ethan approached, and together they pulled the ring. With a soft creak, an entire section of the bookcase moved a few inches forward, revealing a narrow, dark passage. "How did your grandmother manage to build this?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with surprise. "Actually, it was my grandfather," Ethan replied, remembering the stories his grandmother used to tell. "During the military dictatorship, he helped people hide. This passage saved many lives." A louder crash coming from the entrance of the house made them jump. The gate wouldn't last much longer. "Let's go!" Ethan picked up Cindy in his arms again. "Lily, take that flashlight over there on the table and go ahead." The passage was even narrower than it seemed, barely giving Ethan room to pass carrying Cindy. The air was heavy and humid, and cobwebs brushed their faces as they advanced in the darkness. Lily courageously led the way with the flashlight. Behind them, they heard the unmistakable sound of the gate being broken down, followed by shouts and heavy footsteps inside the house. Ethan closed the secret passage as quietly as he could, hoping that the invaders wouldn't discover it. The tunnel descended on a gentle slope, making occasional turns. The walls were made of packed earth, reinforced with old wooden beams that creaked occasionally. The floor was surprisingly dry and firm, indicating that someone had kept the passage in usable condition over the years. After what seemed like an eternity, but probably no more than 10 minutes, they reached a metal ladder that went up vertically. At the top, there was a trap door. "This must be it," Ethan whispered. "Lily, can you climb up and check if it's safe?" The girl nodded, climbing the steps with agility. Carefully, she pushed the trapdoor open a few inches and peeked out. "It's a kind of storage room," she whispered back. "There's a bunch of boxes and old furniture." "Do you see anyone?" "No, but I hear voices coming from afar." Ethan adjusted Cindy in his arms. She was still unconscious, but her breathing seemed a little more regular now. "Okay, let's go up, but we have to be very quiet." With difficulty, they managed to get out of the tunnel and close the trapdoor, which was disguised under an old rug. They were in a large basement, filled with furniture covered by white sheets and boxes stacked to the ceiling. A wooden staircase led to what appeared to be the first floor. At that moment, Cindy began to cough again. Ethan quickly covered her mouth with a scarf, trying to muffle the sound. Upstairs, the voices got closer. "Father Anthony?" a female voice called. "Are you down there?" Ethan and Lily exchanged apprehensive glances. They didn't know if they could trust whoever was up there. Footsteps on the stairs. A light came on, illuminating the basement. A middle-aged woman wearing a simple employee uniform appeared with a broom in her hand. Upon seeing them, she brought her hand to her mouth to stifle a scream of surprise. "Please," Ethan whispered, "we need help." The woman studied them for a moment, her eyes lingering on the unconscious Cindy and the little Lily. Then she nodded decisively. "I'm Connie, Father Anthony's housekeeper," she said in a low voice. "He's not home right now. He was called to an emergency at the church. But come on, I'll take you to a safe place." Connie led them through a side door that led to a small garden surrounded by high walls. In the back, there was an outbuilding that she used as a residence. "You can stay here for now," she said, helping Ethan put Cindy on her own bed. "No one comes here besides me." "Did you know my grandmother?" Ethan asked, noticing the way Connie seemed to know exactly what to do. "Donna Celeste?" "Of course, yes. She was the one who kept the passage in order, even after your grandfather passed away. She always said that one day someone would need to use it again." Connie examined Cindy with practical knowledge, checking her temperature and pulse. "This cough, it started after she worked at the Alvarez mansion, didn't it?" Ethan confirmed with a nod, surprised. "It's not the first time I've seen this," Connie said, her face hardening. "Tony Alvarez has a particular way of dealing with those who discover his secrets, but this time he's gone too far." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, while Lily snuggled up next to her mother on the bed. Connie checked to see if the door was tightly closed before continuing. "A few years ago, an employee of the mansion discovered compromising documents in Tony's office. Less than a week later, she began to have the same symptoms as Cindy: persistent cough, blood. And what happened to her? Nobody knows. She disappeared suddenly. Tony said she had gone to treat the disease in New York, but a noise coming from the garden interrupted her. Male voices could be heard from the other side of the wall. "They must be searching all the houses in the neighborhood," Connie whispered. "Stay here and don't make a sound. I'll see what's going on." As soon as she left, Lily pulled on Ethan's sleeve. "Mister, there's something you need to see," she said, taking a folded piece of paper out of her dress pocket. "Mum gave me this morning, said it was important to keep it." It was another drawing, but different from the previous ones. This showed what appeared to be a rudimentary map, with a large house, a river, and several X markings. "She made me memorize every detail," Lily continued. "Said that if something happened to her, I should show this to someone I trust." Ethan studied the drawing carefully. The big house could only be the Alvarez mansion and the river. His heart raced when he recognized the area. "Lily, do you know what these X's mean?" The girl nodded solemnly. "Mom said they're places where Uncle Tony hid important papers. She found out when she was sewing the wedding dress and saw him burying things in the garden late at night." At that moment, Cindy began to stir in the bed, her eyes slowly opening. "Ethan," she called in a weak voice, "we need to go to your grandfather's old house by the river." "Why? What's there?" "The truth," she replied before being interrupted by another coughing fit. "About how Tony got the land, about what happened to Lily's father, about everything." Connie returned hastily, her face pale with worry. "Tony's at Father Anthony's house," she said, closing the door silently. "And he's not alone. He brought Rick and 2 other men. They're saying they're looking for a missing family." Ethan looked at the drawing in his hands, at the sick Cindy in the bed, and at the little Lily scared. They needed to get out of there, and fast. But how? And more importantly, would they be able to get to his grandfather's house before Tony discovered their plans? That's when they heard loud knocks on the door of the outbuilding. The knocks on the door of the outbuilding made everyone freeze. Connie quickly signaled for Ethan and Lily to hide behind a large wardrobe, while she threw an extra blanket over Cindy, disguising her shape in the bed. "Connie, open up! It's Father Anthony!" A male voice sounded from outside. The housekeeper exchanged a meaningful look with Ethan before opening the door. A man of about 70 years old, wearing a simple cassock and gold-rimmed glasses, entered hastily and closed the door behind him. "Thank God I got here in time," he said, his breath panting, indicating he had been running. "Dorothy warned me. Tony's searching the whole neighborhood." "Father!" Lily ran to hug him, surprising Ethan. It was evident that they already knew each other. "Little Lily," the priest smiled gently, stroking the girl's hair. "You're safe now, but we need to act fast." Turning to Ethan, the priest extended his hand. "You must be Celeste's grandson. Your grandmother was one of the most extraordinary people I've ever known, and she predicted this would happen." "How so?" Ethan asked, confused. The priest walked over to Cindy, checking her condition. "Your grandmother knew that Tony was falsifying documents. She found out shortly before passing, but instead of confronting him directly, she decided to prepare the ground for when the truth came to light. That's why she kept the secret passage running," Connie completed. "Exactly," agreed the priest. "And that's why she also gave me something to keep, something that should only be used when her grandson returned to town." From inside his cassock, he took out a yellowed envelope and handed it to Ethan. Inside was a handwritten letter with the elegant and familiar handwriting of his grandmother. "My dear Ethan, if you are reading this, it means that you have finally returned to Harmony Creek and discovered the truth about Tony Alvarez. I couldn't stop him from taking our land. My illness weakened me too much to fight, but I will not allow him to destroy the legacy of our family. In your grandfather's old house by the river, there is a safe hidden behind the painting in the living room. The combination is your birth date. Inside, you will find the original proofs of all the properties that Tony has stolen over the years. Not only ours, but of several other families. But be careful. Tony doesn't act alone. He has eyes and ears all over the city, and he will not hesitate to use violence to protect his secrets. Look for Dorothy. She knows more than she lets on. With all my love, Grandma Celeste. P.S. There's something else you need to know about Cindy. The rest of the letter was stained and illegible, as if it had been wet. "What did my grandmother know about Cindy?" Ethan asked the priest, who shook his head sadly. "That only Dorothy can answer. But now we don't have time. We need to get you out of here before Tony—" His words were interrupted by raised voices coming from the main house. The door of the outbuilding had no lock, and heavy footsteps approached. "Quick!" Connie whispered, running to a rug in the corner of the room. Upon lifting it, she revealed a small trap door. "This tunnel leads to the church. It's narrower than the other, but it will be enough to pass." "More tunnels?" Ethan asked, surprised, while helping to lift Cindy out of bed. "Harmony Creek has more secrets than you imagine," replied the priest, helping him. "These tunnels were built generations ago, connecting the main points of the city. Few know of their existence." Lily, who was watching through the window, whispered urgently, "They're coming. Rick is with them." There was no time to lose. With difficulty, they managed to help Cindy down into the tunnel. Ethan followed closely, receiving Lily in his arms when she jumped. "Go," whispered the priest. "Connie and I will delay them. At the church, look for Sister Mary in the sacristy. She will help you get to the river house." Before Ethan could thank him, the trap door was closed over their heads. In the dark, they heard the rug being replaced, and seconds later the sound of the outbuilding door being opened abruptly. "Where are they?" Tony's threatening voice sounded muffled. "Who are you talking about?" replied the priest calmly. "Don't play dumb, Anthony. We know they came here. The doorman on the street saw them entering the church." Ethan signaled for them to continue advancing. The tunnel was even tighter than the previous one, forcing them to crawl in some sections. Cindy followed with difficulty, her heavy breathing. echoing in the confined space. After several tense minutes, they reached another trapdoor. Above them, they could hear the distant sound of sacred music. "It must be the church," Ethan whispered. "I'll check if it's safe." Pushing the trapdoor, lightly, he peeked through the crack. They were in a small storage room, full of candles and liturgical objects. The door was ajar, letting in a sliver of light. Carefully, he helped Cindy and Lily up. The girl immediately ran to the door and peeked out. "The sacristy is right there," she said. "I know it because I help with catechism." "Do you know Sister Mary?" Ethan asked. Lily nodded. "She always gives me cookies when Mom is too sick to make food." The comment made Ethan's heart ache. How many deprivations had that child already faced? Checking once again that the way was clear, they left the storage room. The sacristy was on the other side of a short corridor. They could hear the sound of the organ playing and voices singing in the main nave of the church. An elderly nun was arranging vestments in a closet when they entered. Upon seeing them, she showed no surprise. "You've finally arrived," she said, closing the closet calmly. "Father Anthony told me you were coming. Come on, we don't have much time." Sister Mary led them through a side door that led to a patio surrounded by a high wall. An old car was parked. "There. This car belonged to the priest," she explained, handing the keys to Ethan. "It's not much, but it's discreet and reliable. The river house is about 20 minutes from here, following the old road." "Do you know the house?" Ethan asked, helping Cindy into the vehicle. "I knew your grandfather," she replied with a sad smile. "He was a good man who helped many people. Tony never forgave him for stopping his first scams in town." At that moment, they heard raised voices coming from the church. The mass seemed to have been interrupted. "Go," urged the nun. "They must have discovered the tunnel. I'll distract anyone who comes to ask." Ethan started the car while Lily settled in the back seat with her mother. Before leaving, Sister Mary approached the window. "There's more at stake than you imagine," she said enigmatically. "Your grandmother wasn't the only one to keep secrets. Ask Cindy about the flood 20 years ago." Without giving time for questions, the nun opened the side gate of the patio and signaled for them to leave. When Ethan looked in the rear-view mirror, he saw Tony and his men entering the sacristy. "What's this story about the flood?" he asked Cindy as he drove through the cobblestone streets of the old town. Cindy, who had been semi-conscious until then, opened her eyes with difficulty. "The flood," she murmured. "It was when it all started. When a coughing fit prevented her from continuing. Lily, worried, held her mother's hand. "Mister," the girl called softly, "there's a car following us." Ethan checked the rearview mirror. A dark car had just turned the corner behind them. At the wheel was Rick. "Hold on tight," he said, accelerating. "We're going to have to take a shortcut." The priest's old car roared as Ethan forced it through the increasingly narrow streets of Harmony Creek. Lily, demonstrating a surprising knowledge of the city, continued to indicate alternative routes. "There, mister, through the street of the grocery store," she pointed. "There's a passage that only residents know." Ethan turned sharply, entering a street so narrow that the sides of the car almost scraped the walls. Rick, in his larger and newer car, was forced to look for another way. "How do you know all these shortcuts?" Ethan asked, impressed. "When you need to run a lot, you learn all the ways," she replied with a wisdom too sad for her 6 years. Cindy, who was leaning back in the back seat, opened her eyes at the sound of her daughter's voice. "I'm sorry, my little one," she murmured. "I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to protect you." "You were strong, Mom," replied Lily, hugging her. "The strongest person I've ever known." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. Through the rearview mirror, he saw silent tears running down Cindy's face. "The flood," she began in a weak voice. "You asked about the flood 20 years ago." "You don't need to talk now," Ethan interrupted, concerned about her condition. "I need to," she insisted. "You need to know." It was when Tony started to show who he really was. Ethan reduced his speed as they entered a dirt road that ran along the river. His grandfather's house was a few kilometers away, hidden among old mango trees. "The flood destroyed many houses," Cindy continued, "especially in the poorest area of the city. Tony appeared offering help, saying he would buy the land from the families who had lost everything so they could start over somewhere else." She stopped to cough, and Lily quickly offered water from a bottle that was in the car. "But that's not what happened, was it?" Ethan asked, already imagining the answer. "No," confirmed Cindy. "He paid a pittance for the land, taking advantage of people's desperation. Then, when the waters receded, we discovered that that area had been declared as an expansion zone of the city. The value of the land multiplied overnight. And my grandmother? How did she get involved in this?" "Donna Celeste was the only one who faced Tony. She offered shelter to several families on her land, including—" Cindy hesitated, as if weighing the next words. "Including my family." The revelation caught Ethan by surprise. "That's why you knew her so well?" "Yes. We lived in one of the houses on the farm for almost a year. Your grandfather had just passed away, and she was alone. I think she liked the company." Another coughing fit interrupted her, this time more violent. When she removed her hand from her mouth, there was blood on her fingers. "Mom!" Lily cried, scared. "I'm okay, honey." Cindy tried to smile, but it was evident she was getting worse. I need him to know." "Save your strength," Ethan asked. "We're almost there." In fact, his grandfather's old house was already visible in the distance. It was a simple but solid building with a wide veranda overlooking the river. It had been abandoned for years, but still maintained a dignity of its own, as if secretly guarding all the stories it had witnessed. "Tony never managed to get his hands on this house," Cindy said. "It was the only property your grandmother managed to protect. She said the key to everything was here." Ethan parked the car in the back of the house, where the taller vegetation would hide them from the road. He helped Cindy out of the vehicle, practically carrying her to the veranda. Lily ran ahead to open the windows, letting in the light of the late afternoon. The interior of the house was dusty, but surprisingly preserved. The furniture, covered with white sheets, seemed like silent ghosts, mute witnesses of decades of history. "The painting," Cindy murmured, pointing to an old painting in the living room. Behind it, Ethan recognized the work, a landscape of the river that his grandfather had painted. Carefully, he removed the painting from the wall, revealing a small, built-in safe. "The date of your birth," he remembered, turning the numbers on the lock. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, there was a folder full of documents, and to his surprise, an envelope with his name written in his grandmother's handwriting. But before he could open it, Cindy grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "There's something you need to know first," she said, her voice firmer despite the evident pain. "About your father." The sound of tires on the road interrupted her. Lily, who was watching from the window, whispered urgently, "It's Uncle Rick's car, and there's another car with him." Ethan quickly put the documents and the envelope in his jacket. "We need to get out of here. There must be some other way." "The basement," Cindy said. "Your grandmother showed me once. It has an exit that leads to the river." Guided by Lily with a small flashlight she found in the kitchen, they descended the narrow stairs that led to the basement. The space was larger than it seemed, with several partitions created by old bookshelves and stacked boxes. "There," Cindy pointed to a darker area, "behind that shelf." But before they could reach the place, they heard the door of the house being broken down upstairs. Heavy footsteps echoed through the wooden floor. "Search every room," Tony's authoritative voice sounded. "They have to be here somewhere." Ethan guided Cindy and Lily behind a stack of old boxes, trying to make as little noise as possible. In the dark, he could feel the tremor in Cindy's body, who struggled to control her cough. That's when a different noise caught his attention, a low whistle coming from somewhere in the shadows of the basement. Lily immediately became alert. "Mister," she whispered, "that whistle, it's the same as what Benny used to do." "Benny?" Ethan asked, confused. "The boy who disappeared?" Before anyone could answer, a small figure emerged from the shadows. It was a boy of approximately 7 years old, thin and pale, but with lively and alert eyes. "Come on," he whispered urgently. "I know how to get out of here without them seeing." "Benny!" Lily could barely contain her excitement at seeing her friend. The boy signaled for silence and pointed to a narrow space between 2 bookshelves. "That way, it leads to a tunnel that goes to the river. It's how I escaped." The footsteps upstairs approached the basement stairs. There was no time to question. Following Benny, they squeezed through the passage, reaching an even darker area of the basement. The boy removed some loose boards from the floor, revealing an opening that went even deeper. "Be careful," he warned. "There's water down there. The tunnel is partially submerged when the river is high." Ethan helped Cindy down first, then Lily. Benny went last, replacing the boards in place. "How did you discover this?" Ethan asked as they advanced through the damp tunnel. "When Rick locked me in here," the boy replied. "He didn't know about this tunnel. No one did except my grandmother," Ethan completed, beginning to understand. "Yes," confirmed Benny. "She showed me the way out in a dream. At least, I think it was a dream." The sound of raised voices in the basement made them quicken their pace. The tunnel now had water up to their ankles, and the darkness was almost total, except for Lily's small flashlight. "Wait," Cindy said suddenly. "There's something you need to know. Something your grandmother told me before she passed." But her words were interrupted by a deafening sound coming from above. A gunshot had been fired in the basement. The noise echoed through the tunnel, making everyone cringe instinctively. The cold water now reached their knees, and the only light came from Lily's small flashlight, which trembled in her hands. "This way," whispered Benny, guiding them through a curve in the tunnel. "There's a secret exit near that big tree that falls over the river. Grandma Isabel used to show me when I was younger." The boy seemed to know every inch of the way, moving with a confidence that only comes from experience. Ethan realized now that he was thinner than in the photos he had seen, but his eyes maintained a surprising liveliness. "How have you survived here all this time?" Ethan asked, helping Cindy balance on the slippery stones. "Donna Celeste," replied Benny simply. "She left supplies hidden in various places in the basement, as if she knew that one day someone would need them." "My grandmother always thought of everything," murmured Ethan, feeling a mixture of pride and longing. Cindy, who had been leaning on the wall of the tunnel, stopped suddenly. Her face was even paler than usual. "I can't walk anymore," she said. Her breathing labored. "You need to go. I'll only slow you down." "Don't even think about it," interrupted Lily, grabbing her mother's hand. "I'm not going to leave you here." "Your daughter's right," Ethan said, putting Cindy's arm over his shoulders to support her better. "No one gets left behind." A soft sob escaped Cindy's lips. "You don't understand. I don't deserve this help. There's so much you don't know." "Then tell us," Ethan replied gently, "but let's keep walking while we do." With Benny in the lead and Lily lighting the way, they advanced slowly through the tunnel. The water was freezing, and the sound of their footsteps echoed on the damp walls. "It started 20 years ago," Cindy said between labored breaths. "At the time of the flood, I worked as a helper at the Alvarez mansion, cleaning and organizing documents in Tony's office." She stopped to cough, and Lily quickly offered water from a canteen that Benny was carrying. "One night, I found strange papers," she continued. "City maps, land documents, all with different signatures. Tony was falsifying deeds, taking advantage of the desperation of the families who had lost everything in the flood." "Why didn't you report it?" Ethan asked. I tried, she replied bitterly. I went to your grandparents' house, showed them the evidence I had managed to copy. Your grandfather promised to help me, said he was going to gather more evidence. Her voice faltered, and for a moment only the sound of water and their footsteps echoing in the tunnel could be heard. That's when he disappeared, Ethan completed, beginning to understand. Yes, Cindy whispered. And soon after, your family moved to New York. Everyone thought it was because of the accident with your father, but what accident? Ethan asked, his heart racing. It was a subject that his family never discussed. Before Cindy could answer, Benny signaled for them to stop. Listen! In the silence that followed, they could hear distant voices coming from somewhere above them. Tony and his men must be searching the surroundings of the house. We're almost at the exit, whispered Benny, but we need to wait for the right moment. When the sun sets, it's harder for them to see us from the bank. Hidden in a small niche in the tunnel, where the water was less deep, they waited. Lily snuggled up next to her mother, trying to warm her while Benny stood guard near the curve of the tunnel. You need to know the truth about your father, Cindy said softly to Ethan. The accident wasn't an accident. Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold water. What do you mean? Your father discovered Tony's schemes. He was gathering evidence along with your grandfather. On the night it happened, he had arranged a meeting with an investigator from Charleston. But they said it was a brake failure. Ethan protested, his mind struggling against the implications of what he heard. That's what Tony made it look like, Cindy replied, just as he made it look like your grandfather had sold the land voluntarily before disappearing, just as he's making it look like my illness is natural. A series of coughs prevented her from continuing. When she recovered, there were tears in her eyes. Forgive me, Ethan. I should have spoken sooner. I should have contacted your family in New York. But Tony threatened Lily, said that if I said anything, it wasn't your fault. Ethan interrupted, holding her hand. You were a victim too. It's not over yet, she said, her voice gaining urgency. There's more about your grandmother, about why she left all those clues. At that moment, Benny returned hastily. The sun is setting. It's our chance. With difficulty, they resumed the walk. The tunnel made a final curve and began to rise slightly. The water became shallower, and a faint orange light indicated the proximity of the exit. There, Benny pointed to an opening partially covered by roots and vegetation. The exit led to a small natural cove, hidden by branches of an old mango tree that leaned over the river. The setting sun tinted everything with gold, creating long shadows that helped them camouflage themselves. Where do we go now? Asked Lily, helping her mother sit on a rock. I know a place, said Benny, an abandoned house near the old Davies farm. No one will look for us there. The farm of my grandparents? Ethan asked, surprised. Yes. There's a caretaker who lives nearby. She helped me when I escaped, gave me food without asking questions. Ethan was about to answer when Cindy grabbed his arm again. Wait, she said urgently. Before we go, the documents that your grandmother left in the safe, you need to... Her words were interrupted by a coughing fit so violent that she almost fell off the rock. When she pulled her hand from her mouth, it was stained with blood. Mom, cried Lily, hugging her, we need to get her to a hospital, Ethan said, but Cindy shook her head weakly. No hospital. Tony has people there. That's how it started. When they discovered I knew... Then where? Ethan asked desperately. It was Benny who answered, his voice small but firm. Dorothy. She knows medicinal herbs. She's helped a lot of people that Tony tried to silence over the years. How do you know that? Asked Lily, surprised. Because she was the one who took care of your grandmother, Ethan, Cindy replied. When she started getting sick, after discovering the truth about Tony... Her words were interrupted by a distant sound of engines. Someone was approaching on the road that ran along the river. Quick! whispered Benny. "There's a path through the woods that leads us to the farm. We need to go before they find us." While helping Cindy to get up, Ethan noticed something falling from his pocket. It was the envelope that his grandmother had left in the safe. Upon picking it up, he noticed that there was something written on the back, something he hadn't seen before. "The truth lies where it all began, in the rose garden." The rose garden. Ethan felt his heart race as he remembered the immense garden that his grandmother cultivated on the farm, the same garden where 20 years ago his life had changed forever. "Let's go," called Benny, already guiding the way between the trees. "Night is coming, and there's a lot more you need to know." The path through the woods was dark and difficult. Benny guided the group with the confidence of someone who knew every stone and root of the path, while Ethan practically carried Cindy, who could barely stand. Lily came right behind, lighting the way with the small flashlight. "How do you know these paths so well?" Ethan asked the boy. "I spent a lot of time exploring the area after I escaped," Benny replied. "And also, your grandmother used to tell me stories about these places." "You knew my grandmother?" "She would meet me sometimes. When I was begging for money on the streets, she always gave me a snack and told stories about the old farm, about the secret tunnels, about the rose garden." Cindy coughed violently, making everyone stop. Her face was getting paler and paler, and drops of cold sweat ran down her forehead. "We need to rest a bit," Ethan said, helping her sit on a fallen log. "No," she protested weakly. "We have to get to Dorothy. She'll understand when she sees the documents." "What documents, Mom?" asked Lily, sitting next to her. "The ones I hid in the rose garden, along with the ones your grandmother left," Cindy replied, looking at Ethan. She knew that one day you would return." A sound of branches breaking nearby made everyone quiet. Benny quickly signaled for them to turn off the flashlight. In the dark, they could hear distant voices and beams of light cutting. Through the vegetation, Tony's men were searching the woods. "This way," whispered Benny, indicating an almost invisible trail between dense bushes. "There's an old caretaker's house, less than 10 minutes from here. We can hide there." With extreme care not to make noise, they resumed the walk. The woods were denser now, and low branches scratched their faces and arms. Cindy struggled to control her cough, but her whole body trembled. Finally, they reached a small clearing where a simple wooden house stood, partially covered by vines. It seemed abandoned for years, but Benny walked determinedly towards it. "Maria!" he called, softly, knocking on a specific sequence on the back door. After a few tense moments, they heard footsteps inside the house. A lady of about 70 years old, white hair tied in a simple bun, opened the door cautiously. "Benny!" she exclaimed in a low voice, hugging the boy. "Thank God you're okay. Your grandmother is so worried." Her gaze then ran over the rest of the group, stopping on Ethan. Her eyes widened in recognition. "Holy Virgin," she murmured, "you look just like your father." "Did you know my father?" Ethan asked, surprised. "Maria was the main caretaker of the farm," explained Cindy, her voice growing weaker. "She was here that night." Before she could continue, her legs gave way, and she would have fallen if Ethan hadn't held her. "Come in, quick," Maria ordered, opening the door wider. "It's not safe to stay out here." "Itu." The interior of the house was simple but cozy, illuminated by a few candles. A wood stove emanated heat and a comforting smell of herbal tea. "Lay her here," Maria said, indicating an old but clean sofa. "I'll prepare a remedy that will help with the cough." While the lady moved in the small kitchen, Ethan noticed that the walls of the room were covered by old photographs. In one of them, he recognized his parents, very young, next to his grandparents in the rose garden of the farm. "It was taken a week before the accident," Maria said, noticing his interest. "Your father was so happy that day." He had discovered something important. What did he discover? Ethan asked, his heart racing. Maria exchanged a meaningful look with Cindy before answering. Maybe it's better for her to tell you. After all, she was the one who helped your father gather the evidence. Cindy tried to sit up, accepting a steaming cup of tea from Maria's hands. Your father was a lawyer, she began, her voice a little firmer after a few sips of the tea. He was investigating how Tony got so much land after the flood. He discovered that there was a scheme involving registry office employees, document forgery. And you helped him? Ethan asked, sitting next to her. I worked at the Alvarez mansion. At the time, as I said before, I had access to Tony's office. I started making copies of the documents I found, handing them over to your father. She stopped to take more tea, while Lily and Benny settled on the floor near their feet, listening intently. That's when your father discovered something. Even bigger, Cindy continued. It wasn't just about the land. Tony was involved in a much more complex scheme. Something related to embezzlement of public funds, overbilling of construction projects, and that's why Ethan couldn't complete the sentence. Yes, Cindy replied, silent tears running down her face. On the night of the accident, your father had arranged a meeting with a prosecutor from Charleston. He was going to hand over all the evidence, but he never made it. Maria, who had returned to the kitchen, came back with more tea and some slices of cake. Eat a little, honey, she said gently to Lily. You too, Benny. You're so skinny. The children accepted the cake with evident gratitude, while the lady continued. It was Dorothy who discovered it first. She always had a knack for knowing things. The morning after the accident, she came running here, saying we needed to protect the documents. What documents? Ethan asked. The ones your father had gathered, Cindy replied. I had made copies of everything, handed them over to him the previous afternoon. When I heard about the accident, I ran to his office, but it was too late. Tony had arrived first, taken everything. But not everything, interrupted Maria with a small smile. Your grandmother was smarter than Tony imagined. She had been keeping her own evidence for years, documents, photographs, recordings. And where is all that now? Ethan asked. In the rose garden, Cindy replied. Your grandmother created an ingenious system. Each important rose had a meaning, a clue, like a map for those who knew how to read. That's why she spent so much time in the garden, Maria completed. It wasn't just her love for flowers, it was her way of protecting the truth. At that moment, they heard the distant sound of engines approaching on the main road of the farm. They're coming, whispered Benny, running to the window. Don't worry, Maria said with surprising calm. This house has more secrets than it seems. Come with me. She led them to the pantry, where she moved some bags of groceries, revealing a trapdoor in the floor. It leads to a natural grotto, she explained. On the other side, there's a path that goes straight to the rose garden, but you need to be quick. The sun will rise in a few hours. While helping Cindy down the ladder of the trapdoor, Ethan asked, Why is the rose garden so important? Because that's where it all began, Cindy replied. That's where your father found the first evidence against Tony. That's where your grandmother hid the most important documents. And it was there. She hesitated, exchanging a meaningful look with Maria. It was there what? Ethan insisted. It was there that your mother made her last discovery, Maria completed softly, on the night she also disappeared. Maria's revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. His mother, after all these years, his family had always told him that she had left, abandoned everything after the loss of her husband. But now, why did no one ever tell me? He asked, his voice choked. Your grandmother wanted to protect you, Maria replied gently. You were too young, and after your mother disappeared, Tony began to pressure your family even more. That's why your grandmother decided that you needed to go to New York. The sound of footsteps above them interrupted the conversation. Someone was approaching the house. "Go," Maria whispered urgently. "Follow the tunnel to the end. At the exit, look for the yellow rosebush with double flowers. That's where it all begins." Quickly, she closed the trapdoor over their heads. In the darkness of the tunnel, illuminated only by Lily's small flashlight, they could hear muffled voices coming from the house. "This way," whispered Benny, taking the lead again. "I know this way." The tunnel was different from the previous ones. It seemed older, with roots crossing the ceiling in some places. The floor was uneven, and in some sections they had to stoop to pass. "How do you know all these tunnels?" Lily asked her friend. "Your grandmother showed me in dreams," he replied simply. "Every night, when I slept hidden in the basement of the old house, she appeared and taught me a new path." "But my grandmother had already—" Ethan began, confused. "I know," interrupted Benny, "but she kept coming, said she had an important mission that she needed to protect the children of the city until you returned." Cindy, who had been leaning on the walls of the tunnel, stopped suddenly. "Your grandmother knew," she said, her voice weak but urgent. "Knew that Tony was using children for his schemes long before Rick appeared. That's why she started creating a protection network. The Rose Garden was just a part of it." "What kind of network?" Ethan asked, helping her sit on a ledge of the tunnel to rest. "Trusted people spread throughout the city. Dorothy, Maria, Father Anthony, each had a piece of the puzzle, a piece of the truth that needed to be protected until the right moment." "And what is that moment?" "Now," she replied, taking something out of her dress pocket. It was an old key, made of darkened bronze. "Your mother gave me this the last time I saw her, said it was the key to understanding everything." At that moment, Benny, who had gone a little ahead to check the way, came running back. "There's a fork right there," he said. "One path leads to the Rose Garden, the other goes to the main house of the farm." "How do we know which one is the right one?" asked Lily. "By the smell," replied Cindy, surprising everyone. "Your grandmother always said, 'Follow the scent of roses, it never deceives.'" Indeed, a light floral fragrance could be perceived coming from one of the tunnels. They followed it, Cindy now walking with more difficulty, supported by Ethan. The tunnel began to rise slightly, and the air became fresher. Small cracks in the ceiling let in some of the light of dawn. "We're coming," whispered Benny, "but we need to be very careful. The garden is in an open area." Finally, they reached an iron ladder that went up vertically. At the top, a metal lid was partially covered by roots and moss. "Let me check first," said Benny, climbing up with agility. He pushed the lid lightly and peeked out. After a few tense seconds, he signaled for them to climb up. They emerged in the middle of a bed of white roses. The garden was immense, much larger than Ethan remembered. Rows and more rows of rose bushes stretched in all directions, creating a natural labyrinth of colors and aromas. "There," pointed Lily excitedly, "the yellow rose bush that Maria spoke of." It was a majestic plant, its large and fragrant flowers shining like gold under the first light of day. At its feet, a small metal plate was partially buried. Ethan knelt down to examine it better. There was something engraved on the plate, but the years had made the inscription almost illegible. "To my daughter-in-law," read Cindy with difficulty, "who found the truth in the rose garden." "My mother," murmured Ethan. "She discovered something here," confirmed Cindy. "Something related to the documents that your father was gathering. On the night she disappeared, she had come here to meet your grandmother." "How do you know that?" "Because I was with her," replied Cindy, tears running down her face. "I was young. I worked at the Alvarez mansion. Your mother had asked me for help making copies of some documents, but when we got here," her voice faltered, and another coughing fit prevented her from continuing. When she recovered, her face was even paler. "What happened here?" Ethan insisted, gently. "Tony," she replied simply. "He followed us. Your mother managed to push me into the tunnel before Before. Lily hugged her mother, while Benny continued to watch the surroundings of the garden. "The key," Cindy said suddenly, extending the old key to Ethan. "Your mother said it opened something important here in the garden, something that Tony should never find." Ethan examined the key more closely. On the handle, there was a small symbol engraved, a stylized rose. "The statues!" exclaimed Benny suddenly. "There are several scattered throughout the garden, all with the same symbol. Grandma Celeste used to say that each statue guarded a secret," recalled Cindy. "But only one guarded the truth." They began to examine the garden more closely. There were dozens of statues, angels, children, animals, all covered in moss and vines. "How will we know which one is the right one?" asked Lily. "The truth lies where it all began," quoted Ethan, remembering the message on the envelope. "What else happened in this garden, besides the disappearance of my mother?" Cindy closed her eyes, as if searching for a distant memory. "The wedding," she said finally. "Your parents got married here, under the arch of red roses. Your grandmother always said it was the happiest day of her life." "The arch is still there," pointed Benny to a structure covered in roses at the back of the garden. They approached. Cautiously, the metal arch was partially rusted, but the roses still bloomed vigorously. At the base, a small statue of a dancing couple caught Ethan's attention. "The symbol!" exclaimed Lily, pointing to the base of the statue. "It's the same as on the key!" With trembling hands, Ethan inserted the key into the lock hidden in the base of the statue. It turned with difficulty, and a soft click was heard. The pedestal of the statue opened like a small door, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, there was a metal box, the size of a large book. "Your mother's documents," whispered Cindy, "all the evidence she gathered." But before Ethan could open the box, a sound of footsteps on the gravel alerted them. Someone was approaching on the main path of the garden. "Quick!" whispered Benny. "Behind the rose bushes!" They barely had time to hide when a familiar figure emerged between the flowers. It was Dorothy, carrying a basket of herbs and looking strangely calm. Dorothy's presence in the rose garden was so unexpected that for a moment no one moved. The old maid of Donna Celeste walked calmly among the rose bushes, as if she were just doing her morning harvest of herbs. "You can come out," she said softly, without looking directly at where they were hidden. "I knew you would come here today. I was waiting." Hesitantly, Ethan came out from behind the rose bushes, still holding the metal box. Cindy came right behind, supported by Lily, while Benny remained partially hidden, always alert. "How did you know we would be here?" Ethan asked. Dorothy smiled, placing her basket on the ground. "Your grandmother told me." "But my grandmother—" "I know," she interrupted gently, "but Celeste had a special gift. Even after passing, she continued to guide the people who needed help. Why do you think Benny found all those tunnels? Why do you think Cindy managed to hide the evidence for so long?" The mention of her name made Cindy have another coughing fit. Dorothy immediately took a small bottle from her basket. "Take this," she said, offering a few drops of the liquid to Cindy. "It will help with the poison." "Poison?" asked Lily, frightened. "Yes, honey. The same one that Tony has been using for years to silence those who discover his secrets. A compound that he adds to the coffee served at the mansion, which causes a mysterious illness that doctors never manage to diagnose correctly." Cindy drank the drops, and almost immediately her breathing seemed to become easier. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" she asked Dorothy. "Because it wasn't the moment. We needed to wait for Ethan to return. We needed him to find the box that your mother hid." Ethan looked at the box in his hands. "Do you know what's in here?" "I only know what Celeste told me," replied Dorothy, sitting on a stone bench nearby. That your mother discovered something much bigger than just the land frauds, something that involved important politicians, businessmen from other cities. And that's why she disappeared, Ethan asked, his voice trembling slightly. Not exactly, replied Dorothy, exchanging a meaningful look with Cindy. Your mother didn't disappear, Ethan. She's alive. The revelation hit Ethan like lightning. The box almost slipped from his trembling hands. How do you know that? Because I helped her escape, Dorothy replied simply. On the night she came to the garden with Cindy, Tony followed them. But I was here too. I had come to get herbs for your grandmother, who was already sick at the time. What happened? Asked Lily, as absorbed in the story as everyone else. Tony confronted your mother, continued Dorothy, demanded the documents she had gathered. But she had already hidden everything here in the garden. When he tried to, well, I managed to distract him long enough for her to escape through one of the tunnels. And then, insisted Ethan, she knew she couldn't go back. Tony would blame her for your father's accident, say she had forged the evidence. So she did the only thing she could to protect you and your grandmother. She disappeared. But where did she go? Ethan asked, his heart beating rapidly. To the same place where other people that Tony tried to silence found refuge, replied Dorothy. A place that your grandmother helped create years ago when she realized that more people would need protection. Cindy, who had sat down next to Dorothy, nodded slowly. The Convent of the Roses. The abandoned convent in the mountains, asked Benny, finally coming out of his hiding place. It's not abandoned, corrected Dorothy with a small smile. It only seems to be. In fact, it's a haven for people who need to disappear for a while. Your grandmother helped create the place along with the Mother Superior, who was her childhood friend. So my mother is there? Ethan asked, barely daring to believe it. She was until last week, replied Dorothy. When she heard that you had returned to Harmony Creek, she decided it was time to come back too. She's waiting for you. Silent tears streamed down Ethan's face. 20 years, believing that his mother had abandoned them, when in fact she was sacrificing herself to protect them. But we need to be careful, Dorothy warned. Tony can't know she's back. Not yet. First, we need to see what's in this box. With trembling hands, Ethan opened the metal box. Inside there were folders organized meticulously, each identified with a date and a name. These are all Tony's schemes, said Cindy, examining the documents. Not only the land frauds, but overbilled contracts, bribes, a list of politicians involved. And this, said Dorothy, picking up an envelope at the bottom of the box. The letter that your mother wrote to you before leaving. Ethan took the envelope as if it was something precious and fragile. The paper was yellowed with time, but the seal had never been broken. Before he could open it, however, Benny, who continued to watch, gave a low alert. There are cars approaching on the main road. Dorothy quickly got up. We need to get out of here. We'll use the tunnel that leads to Maria's house. From there, I can take you to the convent. But what about the evidence? Ethan asked, looking at the box. Leave it with me, said Dorothy, putting the box in her basket and covering it with herbs. No one suspects an old woman collecting her medicinal herbs. Quickly, they returned to the tunnel entrance hidden among the rose bushes. Cindy, stronger after Dorothy's remedy, was able to walk more easily. There's one more thing you need to know, Dorothy said to Ethan before they closed the passage, about why your grandmother insisted so much that you come back specifically now. Why? Because she discovered something in the last days before passing. Something about a project that Tony is planning. He wants to build a dam on the river. A dam? Ethan asked, confused. Yes. If he succeeds, this whole area will be flooded. The rose garden, the old houses, all the tunnels, everything will disappear underwater, and with them all the evidence that may still exist of his crimes. At that moment, they heard voices approaching the garden. Quickly they went down to the tunnel, closing the passage above them. In the darkness of the tunnel, illuminated only by Lily's small flashlight, Ethan held tightly to the envelope with his mother's letter. After 20 years, he would finally know the complete truth. But as they followed Dorothy through the dark tunnel, a doubt gnawed at him. Was he prepared for this truth? The tunnel seemed endlessly long as they walked in silence, each absorbed in their own thoughts. The envelope in Ethan's hand weighed like lead, guarding 20 years of secrets and explanations so long awaited. Finally, they reached a ladder that led to another trapdoor. Dorothy climbed up first, checking if it was safe. "You can come up," she whispered. "We're in the cellar of Maria's house." One by one, they emerged into the small room, filled with shelves with old bottles and jars of preserves. Maria waited for them with cups of hot tea and clean towels. "Quick," she said, leading them to a room in the back of the house. "I saw Tony's cars passing on the main road. They're searching the whole property." They sat around an old table, while Maria served the steaming tea. Cindy seemed much better after Dorothy's remedy, her cheeks regaining some of their color. "I think it's time to read the letter," Dorothy said gently to Ethan. With trembling fingers, he opened the envelope. The paper was yellowed, but his mother's handwriting remained clear and elegant as he remembered. "My dear son, if you are reading this letter, it means that you have finally returned to Harmony Creek and found the clues we left for you. It also means that you are ready to know the whole truth. First, I need you to know that I never, not for a moment, stopped loving you. Each day away was a torture. Each birthday that I couldn't share was a new wound in my heart, but I needed to protect you and your grandmother, and this was the only way I found. Your father discovered something terrible about Tony Alvarez. It wasn't just the land frauds or the forged documents. It was something much bigger, a scheme that involved important politicians, businessmen from various cities, even judges. On the night your father passed away, he had just shown me the evidence he gathered. Documents, photographs, recordings, evidence that could bring down not only Tony, but a whole corrupt system that fed on the misery of the poorest people. But Tony found out, and you know what happened next. In the following weeks, while everyone thought I was plunged in mourning, I continued investigating. Your grandmother helped me, using her contacts, her influence. That's when we discovered something even worse. Tony wasn't acting alone. There was a group, a kind of organization, that controlled not only Harmony Creek, but several other cities in the region. And they used children, Ethan. Poor, vulnerable children, forced to work for them in various ways. When your grandmother discovered this, she decided to create a protection network. The Convent of the Roses was just the beginning. But then Tony began to suspect. People close to us began to get mysteriously sick. That's when your grandmother decided that you needed to go to New York for your safety. And I needed to disappear. It wasn't easy, my son. Each day away from you was like dying a little. But in the convent, I managed to continue the work that your father started. Together with other people that Tony tried to silence, we gathered evidence, built cases, waiting for the right moment. This moment is now. Your grandmother always knew that you would come back when you were ready. She prepared everything, the tunnels, the rose garden, the clues. Each rose in that garden tells a story, guards a secret, and now you have the key to all of them. But be careful. Tony is getting desperate. The dam project is his last attempt to erase all traces of his crimes. If he succeeds, not only will the physical evidence be lost, but also all the history of resistance that your grandmother and so many others built. When you finish reading this letter, look for Dorothy. She knows where to find me. I've waited too long to hug my son again. With all my love, Mom. P.S. Ask Cindy about the music box. She will understand. Ethan raised his eyes from the letter, tears streaming freely down his face. Cindy was also crying while Lily hugged her. "What music is this that my mother mentioned?" he asked. Cindy took a deep breath before answering. "It was a music box that your mother always carried. She left it with me on the night she escaped, saying that one day you would understand." "And where is that box now?" "In the safest place I could find," she replied. In the old chapel of the farm, Dorothy and Maria exchanged meaningful looks. "The chapel?" murmured Maria. "Of course. It's the only place that Tony never looked." "Why?" asked Lily, curious. "Because he's afraid," replied Dorothy. The chapel was built by Ethan's grandfather, a man that Tony feared more than anything. They say he never managed to set foot inside. "We need to go there," said Ethan, getting up. "It's not that simple," warned Maria. "The chapel is on the other side of the property, and Tony has men everywhere now. Besides," added Dorothy, "we need to wait for the signal." "What signal?" asked Benny, who had remained quiet until then. As if answering his question, the sound of the city's church bells began to ring, a specific melody that made Dorothy smile. "This signal," she said. "Father Anthony is warning us that it's safe. Tony and his men have just left the property." "How do you know?" asked Lily, impressed. "Your grandmother and the priest created this code years ago," explained Dorothy. "Each sequence of touches has a different meaning. This is saying that we have about an hour before they return." "Then we need to go now," said Ethan, determined. "There's one more thing," said Cindy, her voice trembling slightly. "In the music box. It's not just the melody that's important. Inside it, there's something that your mother discovered on the night that your father... Something that she never told anyone except to me." "What is it?" asked Ethan. "Evidence," she replied. "The final proof that Tony isn't building the dam just to generate energy, as he says. It's much worse than that." At that moment, a new pattern of bells began to ring, making Dorothy pale. "What was it?" asked Maria, alarmed. "It's the emergency signal," replied Dorothy. "Something happened. Tony. He discovered about the convent." "My mother!" exclaimed Ethan, his heart racing. "Don't worry," said Dorothy, picking up her basket. "Your mother is safe. She was no longer at the convent when Tony arrived there." "Then where is she?" A mysterious smile appeared on Dorothy's face. "In the only place where Tony would never think to look," she replied. "In the chapel." The way to the chapel never seemed so long to Ethan. Even knowing every inch of that land since childhood, every shadow now seemed to hide a danger. Every noise made his heart race. His mother was so close, after 20 years. Dorothy guided them through an almost invisible path between the trees, avoiding the main road. Cindy came right behind, her breathing stronger after the remedy, while Lily and Benny helped Maria carry a basket with supplies. "Your mother arrived last night," explained Dorothy in a low voice as they walked. "She knew that Tony was planning a visit to the convent. In fact, it was she who left false clues to lure him there." "How did she know he was going?" asked Ethan. "Because she knows Tony better than anyone," replied Cindy. "She spent 20 years studying his movements, his patterns, his weaknesses." "And what is his greatest weakness?" asked Lily, curious. "Pride," replied Dorothy. "Tony is so arrogant that he never imagined that a woman he tried to destroy could be smarter than him." Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they reached a small clearing. The chapel stood before them, its stone walls covered in ivy, the small bell tower standing out against the morning sky. "It's so beautiful," whispered Lily, looking admiringly at the building. "Your great-grandfather built it with his own hands," explained Maria. "Each stone was chosen personally by him. They say he put special blessings on each of them." Ethan approached the old wooden door. His heart was beating so hard that it seemed that everyone could hear it. "She's waiting for you," said Dorothy softly, handing him an ornate key. With trembling hands, Ethan inserted the key into the lock. The mechanism turned smoothly, as if it had been recently oiled. The interior of the chapel was illuminated by dozens of candles, creating a welcoming and almost magical atmosphere. The smell of wax and incense mixed with another familiar aroma, fresh roses, which filled several vases along the central aisle. And there, kneeling in the first bench, was a woman. She turned around at the sound of the door opening, and Ethan felt his heart stop for a moment. Even after 20 years, even with her hair now grey and some wrinkles on her face, he would recognize his mother anywhere. "My son," she said, her voice choked with emotion. Ethan couldn't answer. His legs moved on their own, and before he knew it, he was in his mother's arms, as if the last 20 years had never existed. For several minutes they stayed like that, embraced, crying silently, while the others watched from the door, respecting that sacred moment of reunion. "Forgive me," she whispered through tears. "Forgive me for leaving that way." "There's nothing to forgive," he replied, holding her face between his hands. "Now I understand everything." Claire, for this was the name of Ethan's mother, smiled through her tears. "You're so like your father. You have the same just heart, the same determination." She then turned to the others, who were still waiting at the entrance. "Cindy," she called, extending her hand, "my faithful friend, how much you have suffered to protect our secrets." Cindy approached, hugging Claire tightly. "It was worth it. Every moment was worth it. And this must be Lily," said Claire, kneeling down to be at the girl's height. "Your mother told me so much about you in the letters we exchanged." "You also wrote letters?" asked Lily, surprised. "Yes, honey, through Dorothy. It was our way of keeping in touch, of knowing that everyone was okay." Claire then got up, walking to the altar. From behind an old image, she removed a small carved wooden box. "The music box," whispered Cindy. "More than that," said Claire, opening the lid. Delicately, a soft melody began to play, the same song that Ethan remembered from his childhood, the one that his mother played to put him to sleep. But there was something more inside the box. Claire removed a small pen drive, so tiny that it would easily go unnoticed. "Here is everything," she said, "all the evidence that your father gathered, plus all that I managed to collect over the last 20 years. Every dirty deal, every illegal agreement, every person involved in Tony's schemes." "And the dam?" asked Ethan. "What did you discover about it?" Claire's face became serious. "It's worse than we imagined. The dam isn't just to erase the physical evidence of Tony's crimes. It's part of a much bigger plan." She opened her bag and removed some architectural plans. "These are the real plans of the project," she explained, spreading the papers on the altar. "The ones that Tony presented to the City Hall are false. He's not planning a small dam for power generation. He's planning a gigantic artificial lake. But that will flood much more than just the area of the farm," said Maria, examining the plans. "Exactly," confirmed Claire. "It will flood practically the entire valley. Dozens of families will lose their homes, their land. And guess who has already bought all the surrounding land, where the value will multiply after the lake is formed?" "Tony," replied Ethan, feeling his stomach churn. "He and his partners," completed Claire. "It's a project of millions, and the worst, I discovered that the water in the lake will be contaminated." "How so?" asked Dorothy, alarmed. "The technical studies that they hid show that there are deposits of toxic minerals in the soil. When the water rises, it will contaminate the entire water table in the region. In a few years, no one will be able to live here anymore." "And why would he do that?" asked Lily, her small voice showing the fear she felt. "Because that way he can buy all the land for very low prices when people start to get sick and need to move," replied Claire. "It's a long-term plan to become the owner of the entire valley." At that moment, the sound of the church bells started again, this time a quick and urgent touch. "It's the danger signal," said Dorothy, running to the chapel door. "Tony is coming back, and he's not alone." Claire quickly put the documents away and handed the pen drive to Ethan. "Son, listen carefully," she said urgently. "There's a secret passage under the altar. It leads to a grotto in the mountains. Take Cindy, the children, and Maria and go there. Dorothy, Anne, and I will distract Tony." "No," protested Ethan. "I'm not leaving you again." "You're not leaving me?" She smiled, caressing his face. "This time I know exactly where you'll be, and I promise I'll find you there. But first, we need to end this once and for all." "How?" he asked. Claire's eyes sparkled with fierce determination. "Because while Tony is here looking for us, Father Anthony will be delivering copies of all this evidence to the FBI in Charleston. It's all arranged. In a few hours, everything will come to light." The sound of approaching cars made everyone jump. "Go!" insisted Claire. "Quick!" While helping the others into the secret passage under the altar, Ethan looked one last time at his mother. "Promise you'll come back?" he asked, his voice choked. "I promise." "My son," she replied with a confident smile. "After all, we still have 20 years of stories to catch up on." The passage under the altar of the chapel was narrow and damp, illuminated only by Lily's small flashlight. The group advanced in silence, each absorbed in their own thoughts. Ethan followed in the lead, the pen drive safely stored in his pocket, while helping Cindy walk through the uneven tunnel. "Your mother is very brave," whispered Lily, breaking the silence. "Like my mom." Cindy squeezed her daughter's hand affectionately. "And you're as brave as both of us, my little one." The tunnel made gentle curves, always climbing. In some places, thick roots crossed the ceiling, and they needed to stoop to pass. The air became fresher as they advanced, indicating that they were approaching the exit. "Your great-grandfather built these tunnels during the Depression," explained Maria as they walked. "He helped people escape from poverty. Your grandmother always said that the walls hold stories of resistance and hope." "Ah. And now we're writing our own story," completed Benny, who came right behind helping Maria with the basket of supplies. After what seemed like an eternity, they reached a wider area, a natural grotto illuminated by an opening in the ceiling through which daylight entered. Clean water trickled down one of the walls, forming a small crystal-clear lake in the center. "It's beautiful," whispered Lily, looking marvelously at the rock formations that shone with natural light. "Your grandmother called this place Rose Sanctuary," said Maria, placing the basket on a flat stone surface. "Because even here inside, where the sun barely reaches, she managed to make rose bushes grow. Indeed, near the entrance of the grotto, some rose bushes thrived, their white flowers seeming to shine in the dim light." "How will we know if everything went well?" Ethan asked, the concern for his mother evident in his voice. "The church bells," replied Maria. "From here you can hear perfectly. Father Anthony will warn us through the codes when it is safe to leave." Cindy, who had sat on a rocky ledge to rest, began to cough again. But this time it was different. The cough seemed looser, less painful. "Dorothy's remedy is working," she said, smiling weakly. "For the first time in months, I feel like I can breathe properly." "Everything will be fine, Mom," said Lily, hugging her. "When this is over, we can start a new life." "It's already starting, my daughter," replied Cindy, caressing the girl's hair. "In fact, it started on the day that Ethan returned to Harmony Creek." Ethan, who was near the entrance of the grotto trying to hear any sound coming from the chapel, turned to face her. "Why did you never tell me?" he asked softly. "When we met again, you recognized me, didn't you?" Cindy nodded slowly. "I recognized you in the first instant, but I couldn't say anything. Rick, he watched every word I said. And besides, your mother had made me promise that I would wait for the right moment." "How did you keep in touch all these years?" he asked, sitting next to her. "Through Dorothy," Cindy replied. "She was our messenger. She took news of you to your mother in the convent, brought information about Tony's plans to us. That's how we managed to put together the whole puzzle." "What puzzle?" "The one of Tony's crimes," she replied. "Each of us had a piece. Your mother discovered about the fraudulent contracts. I found the evidence of the false deeds. Dorothy gathered information about the people he tried to silence over the years. And your grandmother?" "What did my grandmother discover?" Ethan asked when Cindy hesitated. "The truth about your father's accident," she replied softly, "and about how Tony managed to take your family's land." At that moment, the distant sound of the church bells reached them. A specific sequence of touches that made Maria get up, alert. "It's the father's signal," she said. "The FBI has arrived in Charleston. It has begun." "And my mother?" asked Ethan anxiously. "We have to wait for the next signal," replied Maria. "She and Dorothy know what they're doing." As if to confirm her words, another set of touches sounded, this time more urgent. "What does it mean?" asked Lily. "It means that Tony fell into the trap," replied Maria with a small smile. "He followed the false trail that your mother left, Ethan. He's going to the other side of the city, thinking he's found their hiding place." "So can we go back?" he asked, already moving towards the tunnel. "Not yet," said Maria firmly. "We need to wait for the final signal, the one that confirms that the FBI is on its way to Harmony Creek." While they waited, Benny, who had been unusually quiet, approached Ethan. "There's something you need to see," he said, taking something out of his pocket. It was an old photograph, yellowed and worn on the edges. Ethan took the photo carefully. It showed a group of children in front of the chapel, all smiling at the camera. In the center, he recognized his mother, very young, hugged with... "My mother," said Cindy, who had approached to see the photo. "They were best friends at school. It was your mother who introduced my parents." "That's why she trusted you," said Ethan, understanding. "That's why she left the evidence with you." "It wasn't just for that," replied Cindy. "It was because she knew that I would understand, that I would do anything to protect my daughter, just as she did to protect you." The sound of the bells cut through the conversation, this time a long and continuous touch, which made Maria smile widely. "It's the signal!" she exclaimed. "We can go back!" Quickly, they gathered their belongings and prepared to return through the tunnel. But before they could leave, Cindy held Ethan's arm. "There's one more thing you need to know," she said, "about the music in the box." "What about it?" "It's not just a melody," Cindy replied. "It's a code. Your mother adapted the notes to a sequence of numbers, the combination of a safe." "What safe?" "The one that's hidden behind the altar of the chapel," she replied. "Where your grandmother kept the final proof, the document that proves that Tony was involved in your father's accident." Before Ethan could process this information, another sound of bells began. But this time it was different, urgent, almost desperate. "Something is wrong," said Maria, her face paling. "This is the extreme danger signal." "What happened?" asked Lily, frightened. "Tony," replied Maria. "He must have discovered the plan. He's going back to the chapel." "My mother!" exclaimed Ethan, already running towards the tunnel. "Wait," called Cindy. "We need the combination of the safe, the music. Do you remember the melody?" Ethan stopped, closing his eyes, trying to recall the music that his mother played to put him to sleep. The notes began to emerge in his memory, one by one, and then he realized they weren't just notes, they were numbers. 4, 7, 1, 9, 3, he murmured, opening his eyes. "That's the combination." Another urgent touch of the bells echoed through the grotto. "Let's go," he said. "My mother needs us." The return through the tunnel was much faster than the going, with Ethan practically running in the lead, guiding the group through the dark passage. The fear for what could happen to his mother gave wings to his feet, while the combination of the safe echoed in his mind like a mantra. 47193. When they finally reached the trapdoor under the altar of the chapel, Ethan stopped to listen. Raised voices came from above, and among them he recognized his mother's voice. "It's over, Tony," said Claire with surprising calm. "The evidence is already with the FBI." "You think that scares me?" Tony's voice sounded angry, but there was a tremor of fear in it. "I've been through investigations before. I have powerful friends." "Not this time," was Dorothy's voice now. "Not with the evidence we have." Ethan signaled for everyone to be silent while pushing the trapdoor lightly, creating a small slit to observe. His mother and Dorothy were standing near the altar, facing Tony, who seemed aged and defeated despite his still arrogant posture. Rick was by his side, looking nervous and insecure. "What evidence?" asked Tony, trying to maintain control. "Those old documents that you stole, I can explain each one of them." "It's not just the documents," replied Claire. "It's the depositions, all the people you tried to silence over the years. They're talking now, Tony. All of them." At that moment, the sound of sirens began to be heard in the distance. Tony's face paled visibly. "You don't understand," he said, his voice now almost pleading. "Everything I did was for the progress of the city. The dam will bring development, jobs. The dam will kill everyone," interrupted Claire harshly. "You knew about the contaminants in the soil. You knew that the water would be poisoned. And even so, you continued with the project. It was an error in the technical reports," he tried. "Don't lie." Claire's voice thundered through the chapel. "We found the original studies. We know that you altered the results." The sirens were closer now. Rick began to retreat towards the door. "Enough!" shouted Tony, advancing menacingly towards Claire. It was at that moment that Ethan pushed the trapdoor and emerged from the hiding place, followed by Cindy and the others. "Don't you dare touch her," he said, his voice low but firm. Tony turned around, surprised by the sudden appearance. His eyes ran over the group until they fixed on Cindy. "You!" he exclaimed. "You should have been dead for months. The poison!" "The poison you put in my coffee," replied Cindy, her voice stronger than ever. "Dorothy discovered the antidote, the same herbs that saved other people that you tried to silence." Rick, seeing the situation deteriorate, tried to run to the door, but found his way blocked. "Father." Anthony was there, accompanied by several FBI officers. "Tony Alvarez," said one of the officers, entering the chapel, "you're under arrest." But Tony wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the altar, where Claire had just opened a secret panel, revealing a small safe embedded in the wall. "No!" he shouted, trying to advance, but was held back by the police. With firm hands, Claire entered the combination into the safe. 47193. The door opened with a soft click. From inside, she removed a single yellowed envelope. "Do you know what this is, Tony?" she asked, her voice loaded with 2 decades of contained pain. "It's the confession of the mechanic you bribed to sabotage. My husband's car. He wrote everything before disappearing, how you looked for him, how much you paid, exactly what you ordered him to do." "That's a lie," protested Tony, but his voice had lost all conviction. "The letter is authenticated at the registry office," continued Claire, "dated 2 days before the accident. He knew that you planned to silence him too, so he left his confession in a safe place. My husband discovered it and kept it here, in the only place where he knew you would never look." While the police handcuffed Tony and Rick, Ethan approached his mother, who finally let the tears run freely down her face. "It's over," he whispered, hugging her. "It's over," she confirmed, returning the hug with all the strength of 20 years of longing. Cindy approached them, Lily clinging to her hand. The girl looked at everything with wide eyes, trying to process that her nightmare had really ended. "What happens now?" she asked innocently. Claire knelt down to be at the girl's height. "Now, little one, we start to rebuild, to do everything right this time." The next few weeks were of intense change in Harmony Creek. With the arrest of Tony and his accomplices, many truths came to light. The dam project was cancelled, and the illegally taken land began to be returned to its rightful owners. The old Davies farm returned to the hands of the family, and Claire suggested transforming it into a community centre where people could learn crafts and rebuild their lives. The rose garden, now under the care of Dorothy, flourished more beautiful than ever. Cindy, completely recovered after treatment with Dorothy's herbs, reopened her sewing workshop, this time teaching other women in the community. Lily could finally be just a child, playing with Benny and other children in the rose garden without fear. The story of Claire's silent resistance, of the strong women who protected the secrets of the city, of the tunnels that saved lives, began to be told with pride by the residents. The chapel, now restored, became a symbol of hope and renewal. On a golden Sunday afternoon, about 6 months after the events in the chapel, a small celebration brought everyone together in the rose garden. It was Lily's birthday, and for the first time in her life, she could celebrate without fear. Claire and Ethan watched the girl playing with other children, while Cindy organized the candy table with the help of Maria. "You know," said Claire softly to her son, "when I decided to leave 20 years ago, my biggest fear was that you would grow up hating me." "I never hated you, Mom," replied Ethan. "Even without understanding, even suffering, something inside me knew that there was a bigger reason. Your grandmother wrote to me, telling me about you," she continued, "how you were growing up, your successes, your sorrows. It was like knives in my heart not being able to be there. But she always said that one day you would return, and that then everything would make sense." "And it did," he smiled, "even if the path was more complicated than we expected." "The best paths usually are," she replied, watching Lily blow out the candles on her cake, surrounded by smiles and applause. Cindy approached them, her eyes shining with happiness to see her daughter finally free and happy. "She asked for a special wish before blowing out the candles," Cindy recounted. "Do you know what she asked for? That all the children in the town can be as happy as she is now." "And they will be," said Claire with conviction. "We'll make sure of it." As the afternoon progressed and the shadows lengthened in the garden, the sound of laughter and conversations filled the air. The roses swayed gently in the breeze, as if they also celebrated the victory of love over fear, of truth over lies, of justice over greed. And there, among the flowers that his grandmother had planted with so much love, Ethan finally understood the true meaning of coming home. It wasn't just returning to a place, but rediscovering his history, reconnecting with his roots, and mainly helping to build a better future for those who would come after. The sun set on the horizon, painting the sky pink and gold, as a new page began to be written in the history of Harmony Creek, a story of redemption, of new beginnings, and above all, of hope.